Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about why everybody should learn economics and why economics is a philosophy. So let's start at the beginning. Philosophy. Philion Sophia, meaning love of wisdom in Greek, was the first iteration of man's attempt at conscious thought, some would say. Physics, mathematics, and all other sciences were a philosophy at one point or the other. What this means is that before the steadfast rule and optimal way of solving a problem is found, there needs to be a multitude of different thoughts and actions before something can be considered an exact science. For example, a product of the first attempt at understanding the chemical stance of the universe was alchemy, the medieval forerunner of chemistry. It was concerned with the transmutation of matter in particular, with the attempts of turning metal into gold or finding a universal elixir. This is where the famous myth of the Philosopher's Stone finds its roots. I think there was this famous movie, As Above, So Below, that had this stone or Philosopher's Stone in it. But in any case, most people would say that alchemy missed its mark and was a dead end, because we as humans can't really make gold out of metal. But out of the ashes of alchemy, chemistry was born. A sort of odd, mystical and creative manner of thought had to be pursued to find the best plausible solution to solve the question of chemistry and the makeup of the known universe. This means that philosophy is the abstract thought of solving a problem with no one-way fixed solution. Take the famed question of the existence of God. It can be solved or refuted by a multiplicity of factors and thus falls under the term philosophy, named theology. Such is economics. The ways to solve a problem are so complex and diverse that no one way can be seen as correct. The factor that makes economics so difficult to solve is that any problem or solution can be argued for under the right circumstances and conditions. That is why the phrase ceteris paribus, all things being unchanged and staying equal or constant, this phrase finds its way into almost all economic exam halls. Some might say that this statement is incorrect, because from a deterministic point of view, there is an optimal answer or optimal response to the question. And if all factors are computed correctly, we would find a solution. But because of the nature of economics with a sort of circular effect, meaning that all factors affect all other factors, a sort of butterfly effect, it becomes inconceivably difficult to factor in all the known possibilities and constituents. Take the Galton board for a fitting example now. Invented by Sir Francis Galton, it is a statistical principle that tells us that if we take a large enough sample from any population, the distribution of the sample means will tend to be normal, regardless of the original distribution of the population. This means that we can use the normal distribution to make predictions and estimates about our sample data, even if we don't know anything about the original population. If we put it now simply in layman's terms, if we have a large enough sample size, although we do not know the exact starting point and path of each ball it is going to take, we know that the aggregate will form a bell-shaped curve each time. It was Dale Carnegie, he said it was about 100 years ago now, that when dealing with people, let us remember, we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion. The actions of one person towards another are very hard to predict. But as soon as we start to see them as an aggregate, a graphable pattern starts to emerge. As we peer through all the graphs and politics and statistics, we see at the core, it's the study of human behavior. The more we learn and observe, the more foreseeable certain events become. But still, the graphs are mostly predictions of the optimal outcome of the aggregate scenario. And human beings are much more complicated than a Galton board. Predictions are much more unstable, which in simple terms means that they never look the same at any given point. And as soon as one throws human emotion into the concoction, the whole show goes up in flames. If you don't believe me, try to count the number of times an economic prediction was made and was precisely accurate. It's to ask someone where they will be in the next foreseeable week and then in the next foreseeable 10 years. The further into the future you look, a sort of exponential effect takes place, multiplying the possible factors of future events, so that it becomes practically impossible to say where one would be. For instance, the phenomenon of expected inflation is very interesting and showcases the role human behavior plays in economic ups and downs. Let's say a business owner is experiencing a period of distrust in the economy, or rather, more precisely, he perceives the economy as being negative. He can influence the state of the economy just by the way he chooses to behave. For example, he might buy more stock from his suppliers, expecting the prices to go up. Remember, he perceives the economy negatively. Or he might increase his own prices in his shop to keep his income at the same level. Let us follow the train of thought, or the latter idea, and how this one decision impacts the whole community. The business owner increases his prices. The customer's disposable income decreases because of the business owner's higher prices. Thus, they demand higher salaries to keep up with their original disposable income. Higher salaries means a higher cost of production, and higher production costs means increased prices. So the business owner was correct in expecting inflation, this negative price surge, this negative economy, but one that he created out of his own insightful behavior. Notice how the real physical stance of the economy did not change, but the feeling of distrust and future instability of the business owner created man-made inflation out of thin air. A circular effect occurred when the business owner created his own misfortune. It goes back to the old story of how the butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world and it creates a hurricane or typhoon on the other side. Now, this situation we mentioned only encapsulates one business owner and one world of community abiding by the fictional rules that we set. In reality, the business owner is experiencing numerous emotions and can act in any number of ways. And not even to mention that it's not one business owner, but a whole country of people, each acting out their perceived economic stance, everyone affecting everyone. I remember this one definition of money by Henry Hazlitt. He said, money isn't just what I think it is, but what other people think it is. And also what I think they think it is, and what they think I think it is. So we can see why economics is complicated. That is why predictions of economic outcomes are so challenging to make. And it showcases how important it is for a country to peddle an economic persona with a positive narrative and a stable perspective. Otherwise, it risks a mass economic hysteria of distrust. Another interesting economic law is that of the Pareto's distribution. I think I talked about this in some previous videos, but in any case, I can see this as arguably one of my favorite laws because it doesn't only occur in a country's economy, but some, me including, argue that it happens in nature. It states that 30% of the population creates 90% of the wealth. This is an absurd statement to make, but it's not a statement, but rather a natural law. The same as demand or supply. Everybody has a demand and everybody has a supply. For example, 30% of all farmers create 90% of all the food. 90% of content on social media is created by 30% of its users. Natural disasters, 90% of all the damage is concentrated in 30% of the area. 30% of ants gather 90% of all the food. And one of the most shocking facts is that 90% of our solar system's weight comes from 30% of our heaviest celestial bodies. Now, obviously, not all of these are going to be seen as the rule, and they might come under some scientific scrutiny, obviously, but my general point still stands, with the principle staying the norm. I do see this as a very important law to follow when considering managing an economy, because one must remember that when you try to influence or bend the rule, at some point in the future, when you aren't paying attention, the rule is going to snap back to its natural order. Its utility is emphasized when one realizes that 30% of the population has almost all the wealth. So its contribution to the income and wealth distribution argument is detrimental and of the utmost importance. So there are some steadfast computable laws to get to an exact answer, but to get to the decimal, it still seems to pose a challenge, even though the concepts are very easy to grasp. Now here is where we can see how conventional philosophies such as ethics are a very useful tool when critiquing economics. Should just a handful of people have all the wealth? Is it morally acceptable and justifiable that the 5 richest men in North America have more wealth than some countries in Africa? So we can see, or we can use economics as a philosophy in this sense to have an amalgamated answer to our question, using some of the laws of economics with the logical reasoning of ethics. As we can see, economics has a place in the world. It can be seen as a law of nature, but they are not totally the same as the laws of physics and chemistry and math. We do not have the assurance of outcome when formulating and solving our problems, as mathematics or biology does. But we can't deny its presence in our daily lives. When forming social structures, we need economics to guide us if we want to flourish in a society. We need to understand and manage the underlying structures that all societal laws, regulations, and fundamental rights are based on. How a country chooses to run its society can literally mean the difference between heaven and hell. The study of economics can be hugely beneficial, especially for the historical social structures we choose to build a civilization on. Because, after all, like we've all heard before, those who do not know their history are bound to repeat it. And a misstep in economic understanding can have catastrophic effects. Our abstract thoughts and reasonings must be rooted in logic and in fact, in existentialism and in nihilism, in moral and immoral thought, in myth and reality. And only after a strenuous period of hopeful plausibility will we see if we have made the right decision. We will grapple with fundamental questions about human behavior, such as morality and justice, and the relationships between individual markets and how they work. By studying economics, we can gain deeper insights into the nature of the world we live in and the ethical and moral challenges we face, and ultimately, how best to move humanity forward. Oh, we're still here. If you liked it, please like, and if you want to see more of the content, please subscribe. And, I hope to see you again. Bye.